Hello and welcome yet again to Beetle University. I am Professor Moptop as always. Thank you so much a million times over. I appreciate each and every one of you each and every week. This week we're going to continue in our Let It Be discussion. We've talked a lot about Let It Be. You should have a whole bunch of Let It Be audio files in your folders. We've discussed a lot of it. This week we're talking about the Let It Be film. One of the issues that a lot of the fans, as well as the Beatles themselves, had about the Let It Be film was that it was very down, it was very depressing, and of course it came out after the Beatles broke up, and people thought that it just sort of documented them falling apart as a band. Of course, as we've said, they've had there was a lack of direction that the Beatles had during the January 1969 sessions. There had been no clear leader since Brian Epstein passed away, and well, they weren't sure what to do since they weren't playing live concerts anymore. That was a big chunk of what they did to make their money, and now that that was over, they were a little bit aimless. They had discussed performing this final concert that they were going to do after all the sessions. After they wrote and rehearsed and recorded their new album, they were going to play a live show, and they weren't sure where they were going to do it or if they were going to do it at all. Some of the different possibilities suggested where they would do it on a yacht. Some sources said that they would do a private show where there would only be about 100 people there to see the actual show, and it would be broadcast everywhere. One of my very favorite suggestions, and I'm not really sure who suggested this, but somebody said that they should do it on the moon. This was actually thought about for at least a very short period of time, but it was thought about. The Beatles never did get used to working the early hours that they had to do in January of 1969. Due to the film and lighting crew's union restrictions, they had to be there early in the morning, and they weren't able to change this. They had been very used to staying up all night long, sleeping throughout the day. This was a big adjustment for the Beatles. There's a part in the film where George and Paul are really bickering, and a lot of the fans didn't like to see them arguing with one another. Apparently, the Beatles themselves weren't real thrilled with the fact that this wound up in the final edit of the film. Of course, this is what they asked for. This is what they wanted. This was their plan, and they couldn't really criticize Michael Lindsay Hogg, who was the director, for doing what he was asked to do. Now, Phil Spector was the guy who wound up getting the tapes of all the audio that had been recorded during these sessions. He wasn't really sure what to do with them either, so what he did is he watched the movie. So he thought of it sort of as a soundtrack. This is how Across the Universe wound up on the Let It Be album. Curiously, however, Don't Let Me Down, which was the B-side to the Get Back single, was not on the Let It Be album. This is a question that has perplexed Beatle people for years. Well, after the sessions were done, they of course did Abbey Road, and then shortly after that, John Lennon decided that he didn't want to be in the Beatles anymore. It was decided amongst everyone it would be a private breakup for a little while, and nobody would tell anyone, at least not until after the album came out. There had been a bit of an argument, a big argument amongst them, because Let It Be was supposed to be released the same time as Sentimental Journey, which was Ringo Starr's first album. Paul McCartney had also recorded McCartney 1, and that was supposed to come out around the same time. Now, Apple Records had suggested that there shouldn't be three Beatle-related records all coming out at the same time, and they would compete with one another too often. And it was suggested that McCartney 1 be delayed. Now, Paul had been living at his farm in Scotland, and Ringo went to visit him there, and he suggested this, and he said, this is what we had decided. And apparently Paul was furiously angry with this, and he kicked Ringo out and said some rather unpeaceful things to him, and continued to plan that his record would be released, and it was released. On April 9th of 1970, shortly before McCartney 1 came out, Paul released a copy of the album, some copies, to the press, and inside was a self-interview, and in it he said he wasn't going to be recording with the Beatles anymore, and this kicked off the official breakup of the Beatles, which of course spread the world, the news spread around the world instantly, and this is how the Beatles wound up ending. Shortly after that, the Let It Be album came out. Paul was very cross with the way Long and Winding Road was treated, as well as a couple of other tracks on the album. There were legal matters, there were lawsuits, everyone was sued, everyone sued each other. This was how they legally dissolved the Beatles partnership. When the film finally came out a few months after the album, none of the Beatles attended the premiere, and there were mixed reviews from the fans and the critics alike. Some of them thought the music was okay, but the movie itself was pretty dreadful. Other people thought it was not so bad. At any rate, we have the Let It Be album, and even though it has a bit of a somber tone to it, it's the last Beatle album that was ever released until the 90s when they started going through the vaults. Thank you so much, as always. Expect some emails. Expect some WeTransfers. Thank you, as always. And as always, I'm Professor Moptop.